nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down. My brothers on the ground, I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog in partnership with Manscaped. We'll get onto that later. I know we've had complaints that there's been too much manscaping at the start of this podcast. I am Cammy Black. Thank you for joining us on a very, very special podcast. We're going to talk about something that we've been waiting 38 years to talk about, and that is the sequel to Smokey and the Bandit Part 3. Of course, Scotland's first away win at Twickenham since 1983. I was 18 months old at the time, and I asked for a photograph from my mum and dad. So here's a photograph. This is what I looked like the last time Scotland won at Twickenham. It's me on a boat in London. You can tell it's London because it says London on the life belt behind me. So for the special podcast, we are joined by two very special guests. I would say they're neutral, but I think they're both Wales fans. First of all, we have rugby analyst Sam Larner. Hello, Sam.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No problem. And also we've got Grav from the Ruck and Roll podcast. Good evening, Grav.
Hi, how are you doing?
Not bad. And also the man who came third in the Bonniest Baby in Butte competition 2018, it is John Anderson.
I tried to, under the right to disappear that Google offer, I tried to get rid of that, and I thought that was sorted, but clearly not.
Well, we're live at the moment on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter as well. We are also available to download and listen to afterward on various podcast apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Acast. Thank you, everyone. We've had a spate of reviews this week after we begged for them because we'd had a lot of negative reviews calling us woke. So we said we'd read the best one out. The best one this week was from Dehydrato, which says, consistently superb and insightful. Cammy's the most intelligent, thoughtful and erudite voices in Scottish rugby. Stay woke, boys.
Whoa.
So I am introducing this evening. That is our woke klaxon. I am banning all woke chat until hands in the ruck. That's the new policy. If I think anyone's getting too woke too early, then the woke klaxon will be brought out.
Can I just check what was the name of the person who wrote that review again? Just out of interest.
Dehydrato. There were ones that said nice things about you, John, but I'm the host, so I get to pick the best one.
I was going to say, that's clearly buttering up the boss man. That's like somebody's after a promotion or something. That's shocking.
Anyway, you can also sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast for £3 a month. And you get exclusive content, mini podcasts. John and I are doing match previews when the teams are announced as well for Patreons. You can join our super secret Facebook group where people are bonding over Dungeons and Dragons right now. It's not at all what I expected would happen in that group, but it's wonderful to see. For £5 a month, though, you get into the Dougie Donnelly Members Lounge and you get your name read out on the podcast. So thank you this week to Rory Kiernan, Blair Stevenson, and Ross McDonald. Ross, who paid above the £5. I don't know, he's paying £8 a month. I don't know if he mishit the key, but thank you, Ross.
passports getting converted from some mad currency.
Mad thing, yeah. So we're going to get straight into it. I'm not doing any news. I'm not going to talk about manscaping right now. We're going to straight into the fact that Scotland beat England at Twickenham 11 points to 6. And we're all very excited about that. But I want to start with Sam and Grav because, I'm not going to say you're neutral because obviously you're Wales fans. So clearly that you were leaning one way more than the other.
Completely neutral.
Well, from that point of view, I'll start with you, Sam. Was that a surprise to you?
I think it was a surprise. It wasn't a huge surprise. And to be honest, after about 10 minutes, I was surprised it wasn't more than the 5-point gap it was at the end. I think, England just about scraped through the Autumn Nations Cup, but they won it. And, they played well enough to win it. But you got the sense that there was maybe some fragility there than where Scotland were going the other way. And so it wasn't a huge surprise, but when you're 5 points ahead against England and you're Scotland, I mean, no game is guaranteed.
No, I mean, Graf, what was your feeling during the game? I mean, certainly Scotland squandered a lot of early chances. Did you see them seeing the game out, or did you get the impression England might come back into it?
Yeah, I think that's really surprised me. I don't think it's a surprise that Scotland won it. I think it's just the dominant nature of the performance. It wasn't, I certainly not as the scoreline suggests that it was a close game. They never looked in it. They never looked like England were going to come away with anything. So that a ball, some sort of possession or territory even, but never mind the result. They just weren't in the game at all. I think that's the surprising thing of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's been interesting, John, because after the game, a lot of the pundits and even the English pundits, although Clive Woodward did turn every question about Scotland back to England again, I noticed on ITV, but that's what he's paid to do. A lot of praise coming out for Scotland's performance, and I think it's one of those games where we can confidently say England weren't able to get a foot in the game, not because they were poor, but because Scotland was so good.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fair, and I think Owen Farrell said as much in his post-match press conference. Scotland, as Sam said, from the first 5 minutes, Scotland looked utterly dominant, and they never let up. Even when England started to come back into the match a wee bit, even when Finn went for a wee sit down for 10 minutes, Scotland just continued to do the right thing over and over. And you're absolutely right. It was a 5-point game going on a 15-point game. Scotland were that dominant, and the stats said that at the end as well. Scotland won every one of the major stats. So the only concern would be that we maybe didn't put as many points on them as we should have.
Yeah, I mean, I think the end of the game, that last 5 minutes, was almost a classic Scotland. Where other teams would have stuck it up the jumper and just gone through phases, which it looked like that's what they were going to do. But then for some reason, with a minute left on the clock, Finn Russell called for a drop goal attempt. I mean, Sam, Wales had similar woes this weekend, but I guess it came off for Scotland in the end.
Yeah, I don't actually think that the drop goal attempt was the bad idea. I think, do you fancy yourself keeping it there for, what was it, about 90 more seconds, going through those phases after previous, maybe a minute of going through those phases? Or do you fancy a relatively simple drop goal? So I don't think the attempt was bad, but the pass was bad. And once the pass put Thing in that position where he was, it was 50-50 whether he was even going to get the kick off, then I think he should have just held on to it and tried to make the most of it and got some support, and then they could have slowed it down. But the kick takes you to 8 points, takes you up to 9 points, even takes you kind of out of chasing position, and seals the game. But I think there was a little bit of jittery nerves that came out then when the pass was poor, and then the attempted drop goal really was never on. No. It was a classic Finn moment, John.
Yeah. I mean, I was interested when you were saying there, Sam, that it was a relatively easy drop goal, and I'm sitting thinking, not for Finn Russell, it's not, because whilst this guy does everything, he is utter magic. Apparently he missed Dan Park's School of Drop Goals at Glasgow or something, because he just doesn't do them.
Yeah, nobody does drop goals these days, Grav, do they?
No, that's what I was just going to say. I can't think of many now. I mean, I've had this argument on our podcast and on Twitter for anything. I don't like a drop goal anyway. I'm not a big fan. I don't find them as exciting as some people seem to. Sam will back him up. I'm not a fan of drop goals. I think the thing with going for it was just before half time, Scotland went through the phases then anyway, and England never looked like they were going to take the ball off them. So I think they could have carried on securing possession. I wouldn't have forced it. I mean, Wales's was even worse because it was an aimless kick with 10 seconds left in the clock. So one phase was enough for us. Like blindly kicking into nobody, into no space was stupid. So, but yeah, like Sam said, it was a chance to put yourself 2 scores clear and take the bonus point as well off England, which would have been a real rubbing their nose in it. So I can see why he's gone for it. But I would have gone through the phases. But I'm a hooker, so the less the backs get it, the happier I am.
It's probably something we tend to do, especially when we win, is we do go through the player ratings that we did on the blog. Now, I hold my hands up. I'm responsible for the forwards on this, and Roy did the backs because that's the way we kind of try and split it. We've got we tried a formula for this because player ratings are obviously they're so arbitrary that you're just plucking a number out of 10 out of thin air or stars or whatever you decide to do it. I like obviously the blood and mud leeway of doing it of something's either good or it's
not good.
Not good is the most simplistic way of rating anything. We rate them over 4 areas and then take an average, which seems at least it's transparent. We can show what we're doing. So the Scotland front row, you had Rory Sutherland, George Turner, and Xander Ferguson. I think George Turner took Scotland fans by surprise with how well he played.
Yeah, absolutely. There was concerns coming into the game that his set piece wasn't going to be up to scratch, and that was utterly obliterated by the end of the game because, when was the last time we seen Scotland 100% the line out? I literally can't remember. Scrum went well as well, and the thing Turner does, I think I said this last week, Turner over McInally and Brown has just raw physicality. He is an absolute wreck. He looked like he wanted to destroy his opposite number in every contact he was going into. It's almost scary watching him try to hit people and run into people. So and he done well for the Scotland try as well, in that he was given quite a early pass, but he's got that pace. He was able to take it up. Admittedly, Duhan then had to kind of smash people out the way, but he's still done a really composed thing, which you don't often get necessarily from a rampaging front row. Sorry, Grav.
I've never been described as rampaging anyway. So
there you go. I'm feeling generous. You could be rampaging tonight. You could be anything you want to be tonight, Grav.
Are you more on the kind of WP Nell coming on last 20? Showing up the scrum then, Grav? Is that your role?
I'm more the holding tackle bags just before kick-off. I'm trying to look like I know what I'm doing, kind of up there.
Sam, Xander Ferguson, we've talked about him on this podcast a lot, but obviously we do that with kind of tartan tinted glasses, if you will. That we think he's the bee's knees. He struggled early on in his career, but he started when he got his first cap when he was 18, which is ridiculously young for a prop. But he does a lot in the scrum, obviously, but then he does his stats around the park in terms of the number of rucks that he hits and securing ball. And I don't know that there's any other props out there doing those kind of numbers. I mean, you might know better than me, but it seems quite unusual, the work that he gets through.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's very similar to a player who I almost singularly bang the drum for, which is Jesus Ilocci, the Italian tight head, who does everything that Xander Ferguson does, slightly worse and without the ability to scrummage. And I think
that's a right find.
Yeah. And I think that Ferguson does, he's what you're looking for in a modern day prop. I mean, just to bore your listeners with some stats: 8 carries, second most in the front row after George Turner, He made, I mean, he only had to make 2 tackles. None of them really, apart from Johnny Gray and Hamish Watson, made double-figure tackles. But Ferguson got to 31 rucks, which is up there with pretty much, well, it's the most of anyone bar Cummings and Johnny Gray. So he does a huge amount of work. And bearing in mind, Cummings played 80 minutes and Ferguson played just over an hour mark. So he's what everyone's looking for in a tight head prop in modern day rugby.
Yeah. Grav, is it someone that you would like to have for that kind of player for Wales at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, tight end, we're actually looking all right with Thomas Francis, and he had another stormer this weekend, and his work rate is around the same. It's funny because I put out a poll when the teams were announced, so it was like for like position. Xander Ferguson is who people wanted in there for a Lions team. So it's definitely being recognised outside Scotland just how good he is and what he's doing around the park. He looks a brilliant player, and it's scary, like you said, to come through so young into a position that's generally old men like me trying to hold their own. It's scary what you could get out of him.
Yeah, I mean, and he's got the sassiness about him as well. That he's not. Well, we talk about the sandbags, but also at one point, I think somebody had pointed out today, and I went back and listened to it. One of the later scrums where he turned around and said, Sir Ellis is struggling. The referee,
Genji's struggling, sir. I know, half a point purely for that. That one. That was to be fair, Genji did give a wee chuckle as well at that. I think he knew he was struggling. To be fair, he was getting moored at that point.
Yeah. And Rory Sullivan's the other one. I mean, he does it. He doesn't do the same work as Xander Ferguson does, but he's not maybe being asked to, John. And I think that's kind of it's something I suppose important to acknowledge, that not everyone's being asked to do the same thing by the coaches, but he's still up there as it's a really good find for Scotland that now he's recovered from injury.
Yeah, I mean, he's again another physical big specimen of a boy, isn't he? And he gets about the park well. I think you're absolutely right. I think in terms of game plan, his kind of ask is more about kind of being that first or second man into the ruck and making sure that we're securing ball over and over and over. And with the absolute brute force he has in contact, that's a really, really good use. The great thing about it as well, Scottish loose heads over the years, we've often seen that work rate and that ability to get about the park's great, but our scrum maybe suffers a bit. But Sutherland is a really, really strong scrummaging loose head as well, which he's coming into a lot of people's radars for potentially the Kitty Cat tour, and he also has cracking tattoos, so that helps too.
Yeah, I mean that's what you want in a prop, is good tattoos.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Locks then, Cummings and Gray. I mean, well, I'll come on to Cummings in a minute. I'll start with Johnny Gray. Sam, I'll start with you. The Johnny Gray he came on the scene and we were all very excited. This young lock coming on, he carried really well. He looked the business, and then he really seemed to just fall back on his tackling rate, and that's all he did. But since the move to Exeter, his carrying stats were good this week. He carried really hard, carried well, but he's still making lots of tackles. I mean, to get through that amount of work is phenomenal for and to steal a line out against Maro Itoje as well is not something that you do every day of the week in international rugby.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it, to be honest. I mean, he's everything that you look at. You expect that if someone carries a lot, then they're not going to be hitting as many rucks or not going to be making as many tackles. But he made the joint most carries in the game. He made the most tackles in the game, and he hit the, I think, second most rucks in the game. So he's just, he's complete. Plus, in addition to that, Scotland in 2020 were the worst line-out team in the Six Nations, and England were the best team at stealing opposition ball. And yet Scotland went 15 line-outs without even looking likely that they were going to give ball to England. So, I mean, Johnny Gray and also Cummings are doing amazing work in that second row. And I think, to be honest, Johnny Gray probably gets the credit he deserves, but Cummings, I mean, he has to be in the running for Lions. Just if the game plan you want is, have some dangle some flashy but perhaps not particularly hard working players around him, then you need someone like Cummings to soak up all the grunt work that the Fitchy boys don't really want to do.
Yeah, was it? I think when I looked at the stats I looked at, was it Cummings hit 45 attacking rucks?
Yeah, the most of anyone this weekend.
Yeah, which is unbelievable when you to get through that amount of work. We've got a comment coming, Grav. I'll throw this one to you. This is from Brandon Smith Rugby. It says, as a Welshman, I hate to say it, but maybe Johnny Gray is ahead of Alan Wynne-Jones in the Lions pecking order. A heck of a shift from him and a brilliant all-round game. I mean, I'm being kind to you, but it's maybe a stretch to say that Alan Wynne-Jones is in Lions contention given his advancing years and receding hairline. But I mean, do you think that's fair?
I've got to be careful. I got my Welsh citizenship taken away here. But you said about when I take Ferguson, I think either one of the second rows I bring into the Welsh set. If I can pinch one player, I'm taking one of those. I think, as we say, Alan Wynne, despite another amazing performance on the weekend, the number of tackles he made, the work that he went through, and then with 82nd minute, he's tracking back to make a tackle or assist Tiprick in a tackle. But I think our second choice lock is perhaps a little bit not set in stone as of yet, and we don't know how long we've got left with Alan Wynne. So if I could steal either one of them, I'd be absolutely delighted as a Welshman, because Cummins' work rate was exceptional. I say it in rucks. Wales are missing that a little bit. We're turning ball over a little bit easily at the moment, and Johnny Gray has found Johnny Gray again. That this is what we expected of him when he first came into that Scottish setup. It's like, for you guys, it must be like having Johnny Gray back again.
I mean, it is, John, isn't it? And I mean, the one thing I said in the player ratings for Scott Cummings, and again, we don't know what he's been asked to do by Gregor Townsend and the forwards coaches, but we know from his Glasgow performances, and even I think the one of the early Scotland runs out, that he can run with ball and offload.
Yeah.
But he's not doing it. So I don't know if they're just keeping his powder dry. Is it because he's still quite wet around the ears from a national rugby point of view? But it would be nice to see him kind of add that to his game at international level, or be given a chance to anyway.
Yeah, I think there is an element of he's starting to become indispensable for Scotland, and that he's now started X amount of games in a row. Townsend obviously thinks he's his go-to guy, and he does a job that Townsend wants him to do. And it was the same at Glasgow. He was working very hard under Townsend. I agree, he could probably carry more, but then there is, and it's interesting actually. He said about the grunt work, because it's often been considered that maybe Scott Cummings does some of the flashier things that you see from locks, those big carries, those breaking the lines, those offloads. But it is really interesting just to see that utter work rate that he's getting through now, whilst still having the ability to, opposition coaches will be looking at the Scotland team and going, right, okay, where are we getting line breaks from? Who's going to come through us? And they will be keeping an eye on a Scott Cummings and thinking, right, well, let's just get a couple of people there, make sure he's not going bursting through like the giant giraffe that he is, and off he goes gallivanting down the park. But it is, it's a team game, and you need someone to be doing all those different things. I think what's been really noticeable, actually, since Scott Cummings came into the side, is that the speed of Scottish ball at the Ruck it's been cleaner and it's been faster. And I always, watching Scotland, you always get that terrifying feeling of, we're going to turn this one over, right? We're going to go into contact and we're going to turn it over. Somebody's have to come in the side. It doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels much more controlled and much more like we're playing on our terms.
Yeah, that's good. I'm very quickly just got to throw to this comment because I quite like it. It's Christian Cooper says, I've been listening for years up in Orkney. The first time I've seen your faces, you're bonnier and more approachable than you sound. So I might even be tempted to become a patriot now. I hope he means Patreon and not like a patriot, like storming the US Capitol in a bear hat.
Christian has clearly not heard the story about the Murrayfield toilets.
Do you want to tell the story about the Murrayfield toilets, John?
Kind of. Now that I've mentioned it, yes. So, long story short, turns out I'm very approachable, and that people want to talk to you in the Murrayfield toilets when they recognise your voice, even when they're maybe mid going for doing your business. People still want to talk to you and ask for selfies and all sorts of things, and it's all a bit disconcerting, really.
Like he was only your voice they recognised.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So please, if you do hear John in the toilet, do let him finish before he asks for the selfie.
Please,
and at least wait till you're outside.
Well, exactly. And I mean, bear in mind, I've now got the OnlyFans content now, so you have to, it's $5 a month for that sort of stuff.
We'll do the back row next. We've got Jamie Ritchie, Hamish Watson, and Matt Ferguson. Hamish Watson, who is eating up ball with the hunger not seen since Army Hammer allegedly likes. Anyway. Hamish Watson had absolutely one of these kind of he's an all-round Hamish Watson game, that Sam, but with a kicking game now.
Yeah, it's an odd mix. I mean, just when you think he can't add anything else, he adds that. Although I will say that on the stats I have him as 1 kicking play and 0 kicking meters.
I assume they only measure the meters if it lands in field.
Or if it goes up the field.
It was Hamish Watson, so there is a chance that ball has not landed yet.
I mean, he is just exceptional. He's he only Duhan van der Merwe broke more tackles than Hamish Watson, and it's just hard to imagine what more you can get out of a back row than what Hamish brings. I mean, he does so much work. He steals ball, he carries ball very well, and that's the kind of thing that, without harping on about the whole unseen work, that's the kind of thing that Scott Cummings and Johnny Gray are kind of creating. They're creating those opportunities for Hamish Watson to do that work. But like you're asking Gav about whether we would take Johnny Gray or Cummings for Wales, I mean, we've got a pretty stacked back row, but Hamish Watson would be in there. He's exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I was thinking about the weekend, Grav, is that Warren Gatland was obviously there, watching that game, and there was almost a lesson, I suppose, from the Scottish back. The Scottish back row aren't the biggest back row in the world. They're fairly light, not massively light, but they were up against quite a monster back row from England. And yet they completely dominated them. And there's almost a template there, I think, for the Lions going to South Africa, is not to be drawn into stacking your back row with big guys, but with technically minded back rowers and going for who's better, rather than trying to meet South Africa muscle for muscle.
Yeah, I think Gatland does like a fetcher as well. He likes a big ball carry. He's known for liking big guys who can carry well, but he does like a fetcher. He likes a player who'll stick his head somewhere where most people don't want to stick it. I think if Hamish Watson was English and played in a Premiership at the moment, BT Sport would be talking about him being like the best player in the world. He's at that level at the moment. Jack Willis, he's that incredible strength compared to when you look at him. Yeah. You don't expect. Was it Moriarty? I think he put on the floor, didn't he, playing against Wales?
And 7 others at the same time.
Yeah, for gang tackle him every time he pick a ball up, because unbelievable strength for a small guy.
It's farmer strength. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's why we had Lydia, but we broke him
again.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, Alistair Duncan Donald says his hands in the Ruck is Hamish Watson not getting player of the match. It was a 10 out of 10 performance. He said the podcast rules of no 10 out of 10s do not apply for wins at Twickenham.
Now, you know fine well that I don't subscribe to the non-10 out of 10 rules of the pod. I am a rebel when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, our rule is, for Sam and Grav and anybody who doesn't know, our rule is that when everyone starts on a 6 and then you go up or down accordingly. The 10, the benchmark of a 10 is Dan Carter versus the Lions. So that's a level of perfection that you have to reach in order to get a 10 out of 10. And I think that's fair. You've got to look at what is the best individual performance of it on a rugby pitch ever. So you've got to reach that level. So that's why no one gets a 10.
I think I would have got overexcited this weekend and started at 10 and worked my way down.
I think me and you could go on fine with these player ratings, Gav. I think we'd be just fine.
Finn's on 9.5 for getting the yellow card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then he is Finn, so he's up to an 11 just for being Finn.
At 12.
I'm the other way. The year that we got beat, so like 65-14 at Twickenham, I gave most of the team a 0 out of 10.
and then I replicated it when we lost to Wales, and we got letters.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I'm
Jim-
a big. Oh, sorry. I'm a Leeds fan for my sins in football, and we once had a player who had a 2 out of 10 in the Yorkshire Evening Post, and he had 1 point for turning up on time and 1 point for wearing the right shirt.
So under our rules, they would have got a 0 because we don't give participation points. You're a professional sportsman. You don't get points for just taking part.
we used to when Scotland were rubbish.
Yeah, the Rossford 6 out of 10.
Rossford 6 out of 10 every single match. Jamie Ritchie, John, it was a quiet performance, but I think he needed it because he kind of lost his way a bit in the autumn. I mean, I say it was a quiet performance. You get Cammy Redpath to come out since. I'm calling him Cammy now because he's Scottish, so we can. Was talking about how much talking he did to him during the game. So there is a lot. His stats weren't like fantastic, Hamish Watson stats, but I think he does a lot of the game management stuff around the pitch that doesn't show up on stats, and it was good. He looked much calmer than he did at the end of the autumn.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. He was starting to the last couple of games he'd had. He was starting to get maybe a wee bit of a reputation for being slightly more hot-headed than we necessarily want. And now it's always great that your six is in causing a bit of trouble and winding people up and stuff, and that's wonderful. But as we've talked about on here before, there's tens of cameras all around the stadium watching your every move now. You can't get away with some of the nonsense that you used to get away with. So doing it properly, he's geeing up his guys around him. He's doing his work. He's doing his work well, but he's getting people around him to be working harder. Also having that slightly more captainy role, which I think we've talked about him as a potential Scotland captain in the future. I think he was vice captain this weekend as well.
He was, yep.
So he's doing that leadership role, and I think, as you rightly say, that doesn't get captured in the stats, but it is very important.
Yeah. Sam, can I ask you about Matt Ferguson? Because in Scotland, there's this view of Matt Ferguson that he's not good enough for international rugby. And we on the pod don't agree with that approach. And Scotland have struggled for a while to find an 8. I think they've found an 8, and actually we'll come to Gary Graham later. I think they potentially found a second 8 as well. But I mean, what's your take on Matt Ferguson? Because he got through and someone else got through a hell of a lot of work at the weekend. And, he's accused of being small, but I think he's the same size as CJ Stander.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Ferguson liked one of my tweets the other day, so he's buttered me up for this question. So, but yeah, I think the thing is, you don't necessarily need every single game your 8 to make massive length of the field runs and be exceptional with their hands and drive a pack forward and keep the ball at the back and then flop over the line. I think Matt Ferguson has proven on Saturday that he's completely, and I mean this in the nicest way, completely adequate as an 8 for Scotland. Sometimes he'll be better than that. I think he was very good on Saturday. Sometimes he'll be worse, but I don't think anyone can look at him and go, well, he doesn't deserve to be there, because he's just putting a consistent string of performances. And I think as well, giving Graham those, what was it, almost 20 minutes at the end, he did a good shift. And I think, if Ferguson is having a little bit of an off day, then Graham can come on for a little bit longer and vice versa. And I think that's what you need. You need the outright stars, which you've got, and then you need the very, very good supporting cast. I think at the moment Matt Ferguson's in that supporting cast, but he is, that supporting cast is very, very good. Yeah,
sure. Grav, I'm going to ask you about Ali Price, because outside of Scotland, certainly during the autumn, there were, I know, like Squidge rates him quite highly. I know there's been a few people talking about, but he seems to still be quite under the radar given the performances he's putting in.
Yeah, I think he's obviously got that problem as well. He's coming in for essentially like a cult icon in Scotland. If you're coming in for Grieg, if you're coming in taking over that mantle, it's always going to be difficult shoes to step into. So unless you've got an exceptional performance, I think it's always going to take people a little bit of time to warm to him. He's been harshly done by for a few years, actually. I think he's always been international quality 9. He's always looked good enough. So yeah, whether it is just that, I say, you're losing someone who's on and off the field was someone that was looked up to and loved and sort of transcended a scrum half, to then come in and have to take over that mantle, and especially when you've got to build as well with a relationship with Finn Russell, which I suppose can't always be easy, because I think Finn doesn't know what he's going to do sometimes. So if you're coming into that setup, I think that you've got to start to build that rapport a little bit and guide him and lead, because yeah, it's not easy to be dropped in at that level.
No, and Johnny, I think he still suffers from that drop in form he had a couple of years back, that people still associate him with that. And there was a couple of early kind of charge downs by Mario Itoje, and maybe, it's hard to know, did he get his blocker in the right place? Was his blocker, I think at one point Xander Ferguson was looking at Ali Price rather than watching Mario Itoje. But he almost gave, later on in the game, he turned that to his advantage, and actually I think he drew a penalty out of Itoje at one point by making him come in an offside position or take him out on the ball. So
yeah, that's right.
He's a lot smarter than people give him credit to. And I know he's not doing the sniping, but I'm not sure that he's being asked to snipe either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, if you think about rugby potentially is a very simple game. You've got guys who are very good at breaking down defences, standing in a nice shape behind you. You need a guy to pass the ball to them. So if he goes off in one of his merries and starts running towards terribly big back rows that want to eat him alive, he's inevitably going to get smashed by them, and then we're probably going to have Xander Ferguson throwing a pass, and that's not really what we want for like Finn to then get the back line moving. It kind of slows the play down. The way Scotland are trying to play, we need Price to be just delivering that consistent ball. And you see all the best teams in the world, right? We talk about sniping scrum halves like it's something that the best teams in the world do. They don't. You don't see, you'll occasionally see maybe Aaron Smith having a snipe, but it's only when it's properly on. And the rest of them, I don't really think. Maybe DuPont, but again, he's just ridiculous. So I don't think Price. I think you're absolutely right. I think he gets a hard rap based on that single game down in Wales.
Yeah,
he gets a hard rap for that. And
Sam, he's quite. Scotland always have this thing, and I think it's again Scottish fans tend to be, scrum halves are too slow. But actually, I think comparatively to other scrum halves, his delivery from the base of the ruck is fairly fast, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually interesting you say about sniping, because when I was in Japan for the last World Cup, we did some analysis of scrum half tries in 2019 compared to 2015. In 2015, pretty much, I can't remember what it was now, but I think it was about 70% of all scrum half tries, which is quite a lot. They're one of the highest scoring positions in rugby, were sniping. And in 2019, about 70 to 80% were support lines, like what DuPont was doing on Saturday.
The cheats line.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what the scrum half position is now. It's actually less about sniping, more about getting there and accurately and quickly passing a ball from point A to point B. And if you can then add on a nice support line and get a couple of tries that way, then I think that's what the modern game is. So yeah, I think Ali Price is doing exactly what he's asked to do, and probably sniping, slow ball, being left without a scrum half probably isn't really what you actually want from your scrum half.
No. We'll move on to Finn Russell now. Now, I was on, for some people know, I was on Radio 5 at the weekend previewing the game against an Englishman who I think was either called Henry or Harry, which are two very English names. So I've not got a photo of that man. I couldn't find him on social media. I assume he was a friend of the radio producers. I've got an artist impression of him. I was asked whether I would have Owen Farrell on my team. I said no. This was his response.
Well, it's good to see he's on the bucky already. I mean, how could you not have Owen Farrell on your team? He's one of the best players in the world. Yeah, a couple.
Yeah, he was so incredulous that I made his phone signal go out. How upset that man was. But I'm definitely keeping that for future. Anytime anyone says anything bad on the podcast, no, John, it's going to be...
It's good to see he's on the bucky already. I mean, how
His phone signal could be because maybe he's a Chiefs fan and he's worried about the 5G.
Klaxon.
Oh.
Well done, Grab. You got the first woke klaxon. Well done. Bravo, son. Bravo.
That's going in my bio.
John, Finn Russell. It's frustrating that we'll come on the yellow card in a minute, but it's frustrating, I think, that people either expect him to do these absolutely mad highlight reel games, and when he doesn't, he's not as good as everybody thinks he is. But actually, that game he played was exactly what you would want your fly, a bit like we said about Ali Price, is what you want from your fly half, apart from not tripping over the opposition 9.
Oh, we've all played with 10s who couldn't tackle and just fancied a wee trip of the opposition on the way through. So we'll let them away. No, it was a bit stupid. But I was on a group chat with some Irish lads, and the way I described Finn's performance was, it was very like what Johnny Sexton would do, in that he just got his troops moving about the park. He played when it was on, tried things when it was on. Yeah, there was a couple of charge downs, but that was pretty normal across the whole piece this weekend. There was quite a few charge downs. It's just done the basics well, and it's back to what we were saying, that, you know, if he doesn't throw a 40-meter miss pass into space, then everybody thinks he's had a 4 out of 10 game, and it's just ridiculous. You know, he just done everything well. And like, let's go back to the cross kick for Duhan van der Merwe, right? That 2 inches lower, Finn Russell is a 9 out of 10 game, is, you know, champion of the, possibly, you know, king of the world, and would be possibly awarded, you know, the right to the throne. But instead it misses him, and he's then instrumental in the try, the next score. But it's still, Finn's had a bad game. It's just people are idiots.
I mean, he managed to throw a bullet pass whilst being swung around Maro Itoje's head.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous. I mean, Grav, I know you probably rate Finn Russell, but I mean, we would say, with our kind of, you know, again, our Scottish Rugby podcast hats on, that he's the best 10 in the Northern Hemisphere at the minute. Would you agree with that, or is that us getting carried away with ourselves?
Well, I think it's the weirdest thing at the minute, because he's the most French 10 in France, and he's Scottish. He's stereotypically what you'd expect of a French 10. I mean, we're at the point again, if we've got bigger there, and perhaps we're looking for someone with a bit more flair. I'd love to have Finn Russell in there. But like you said, he's shown that he can play that calmer game, that more sensible game, for want of a better phrase, where he can bring in players around him and do, not so much go through the motions, but just not do anything spectacular, because he's got players around him who are going to do that work. And especially then you put Cameron Redpath alongside him, who's creating things himself as well. And you've got that quick ball coming from Ali Price. So he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to pull off something magical or something crazy, because when you're on top of the game like that, that's all it needs is stewardship. I think perhaps that's where he's had to do it before with Scotland as well, is because you haven't been performing, you haven't been at that level. So you need a mad miss 12 or whatever type of pass he's thrown against England in the past to try and get something, because you've got to force the issue, because nothing's happening. So when you're on top of a game, he's just showed that other side of him, that, if you're on top and we've got front ball and we're playing well, he's happy to stay back and just steward the ship and keep everyone else going. Yeah.
I mean, Cammy Redpath's an interesting one, because everyone, you know, all the rugby hipsters out there obviously know I've been tipping Cammy Redpath for a long time, but he was well down the pecking order at Sale. He's been picked up by Bath and got a run of games. So I think I don't think it'd be a surprise to Cammy Redpath, because he seems a very confident, relaxed kind of guy, but that was a hell of a debut to make in that environment.
Yeah, I was surprised at how well he did, because I thought he should have been given his shot, but I thought probably what that would have meant was 20 minutes at the end of next week's game maybe, or 10 minutes at the end of the England game. But he just looked like he was just born to be there, and I think that he provides that safety blanket almost to Finn. When Finn gets a little bit, gets a bit too Finn Russell-y, then he has that safety blanket. I do think though there's a legitimate concern And this is not to kind of dampen the Scottish spirits, but there's a legitimate concern that Scotland don't score many points, which is not an issue necessarily because you're winning games and your defense is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the fact that Sean Edwards, I made this point earlier in the week, but the fact that Sean Edwards gets this kind of reams and reams of coverage on BBC Sport, but Steve Chandy gets nothing, despite just numbers alone, the two defences being completely different. I mean, Scotland's way better than what France put out. But I do think that there's a concern that you have Finn Russell, not a regular kicker, not a particularly good kicker, as we saw on the weekend. Stuart Hogg, again, not a regular kicker, kind of gets left with the 75-metre into the wing, bombs. And so, you've got those two, and you think, well, you're going to be in these games like you were on Saturday, where it's going to be one score, potentially more if you can kick the points. And I think there's a legitimate concern that who is actually going to kick the points for Scotland, because that game on Saturday, as great as it was, it didn't need to come down to that at the end. There were, I think there was 6. Well, there was a conversion. Couple of penalties, yeah. So it could have easily been 19 points to 6 and much more comfortable. And I do think that potential to bite back if you keep having games where you let the opposition still be in it. Yeah,
and I guess that is a concern, John. And we've talked about that before. That when we lost Greg, we lost that. And I think Finn Russell does. Someone on the was in touch on the. I think it might. Was on touch on Twitter mentioning this, saying we don't have I don't think Finn kicks regularly for Racing. I think he does when he's on the pitch. I think he is. I don't think he's the regular that kicks all the time, but he's their kicker. But it's not, as Sam said, he's not a 99, 98, 95% success rate that he's kicking for.
No, he's not going to go like whole seasons without missing kicks, like we've seen from like Chris Patterson and guys like that. He's not going to do that. But he's a generally around an 80-85% kicker, which maybe not quite good enough at international level. I would have to agree, but you're going to get what you get with Finn, and in lieu of having anyone else who is, the fact is we've picked Greg Laidlaw before when he wasn't the best scrum half, and I'd say that I'm happy to take the angry letters that we get for that, but he wasn't the best scrum half, he wasn't the best in his position, but he was the goal kicker, and we picked him because of that. We can't rely on that now. That's fine. There is a legitimate concern there, and we probably do need to get Chris Patterson along to bore Finn into kicking his goals better.
I think he is. This is the worrying thing. I think Chris Patterson is in there.
Maybe that's the issue then. Maybe Finn, because Finn is virtual Finsanity, maybe Finn needs someone a bit more jazzy. Maybe can we get a jazzy goal kicking coach?
Who would be? We need to think. Who outside the box? We need someone on the same wavelength as Finn Russell, because I think you could say that Greg Laidlaw and Chris Patterson were probably on the same wavelength, probably quite happily.
Roberto Carlos. There you go. The SRUs can have that one for free, guys. I'll take my finder's fee in due course.
Yeah. Grav, Chris Harris at 13. I think he had an absolutely terrible game against Wales. It wasn't his debut because he'd come off the bench against Samoa, but he's taken a long time to get back into the hearts of Scottish rugby fans, but he's consistently been very good defensively. And maybe in kind of the mold of it almost reminds me of some of the Welsh centres that we've had of old.
Yeah, I think he's going to be hard to win sort of the casual rugby fan round as well, because he's like a boring player almost. Like he's boringly dependable. He's the exact balance you need. And I think that's what you've got across the team a little bit more now. He's that exact balance you need to Cameron Redpath and to Finn Russell, in that he's just boringly good. Like, he's not going to give you a spectacular performance. He's not going to be throwing backdoor passes or doing anything major. But I think you're always going to be able to rely on him. He looks decent at club level, and he's fitting in well at the international level. I don't know how he's going to work on your rating system for building his way up from 6, because I think he's always going to be one of those players who's always sort of a 7.5 to 8.5, where he's never going to have a bad game, but he's never going to do anything absolutely spectacular that stands out.
Yeah, I mean, he occasionally hits the ball on a hits a nice running line, Sam, and I think we gave him 8.5 this week, and it's his defense. I think that, and you talk about the defense and Steve Tandy's defense, Sam, but Chris Harris really seems to be kind of at the center of that defensive system.
Yeah, I think that's what you see quite often, that 13 playing such a key role in that defensive setup. It's what makes people nervous about George North playing there for Wales, because he's got everything else. Has he got the experience and the defensive knowledge to play there? And it's not necessarily, is he making big tackles? It's what's he telling the guy on the inside, and what's that conversation? Because that level of chat at the top level is way higher than the Saturday on the park type thing, and that's crucial, I think. And you need someone who's got the confidence to tell someone who's played how many caps on the inside to what to do. And so I think, like Glav says, you do need that boring dependability, because you can dangle the flair around him, but as long as you've got someone who is just going to give you consistent, like Glav says, 7.5, 8.5 performances, then that's kind of all you need, really.
Yeah. The back three then, John. Duhan, Van der Merwe, I think there was some doubts defensively about him when he, inbred, but he's really grown into international rugby since his debut. I mean, it was against Georgia, admittedly, and he was admitted he was a bit nervous, but he seems quite happy at international level.
I mean, I think if we're going for maybe understatement of the season, Cam, I think you may have just achieved it. Yeah, that gorgeous big 6'5" monster is fast winning a place in my heart. He's settled into international rugby really, really well. Yes, there was concerns over his defence when he came to Edinburgh. He'd worked really hard on it, and I think we often talk about a winger's defence and we say, oh, he's a great defensive winger. A winger isn't there to be a great defensive winger. A winger is there to run over the top of English people. And that's what he did. And we like that. See if he just keeps doing that, he will go down in Scottish history as one of the best wingers we've had, simply put, because his defence isn't bad. He can kick. He doesn't have to all that often, but ultimately he's there to get on the end of passes, get on the end of clean up ball as well. That's one of the things that maybe didn't get mentioned so much. He took a lot of static ball against England and then just knocked somebody over, and that's really important. Just take the contact in your terms. When you're that size, it's much easier to take contact in your terms, but I think we're forgetting he's up against some of the people he's knocking over are back rows who are bigger and supposedly stronger than him, but he's just knocking them out the way like they're not there. And it was great to see Owen Farrell try his nonsense tackle on him for the try the wee trademark, the T-Rex tackle, and just get absolutely sat down. Brilliant, love it.
Sean Maitland, Sam, I asked about him. He's probably proof, I think, that Saracens players not having game time was a load of rubbish, really.
That seems to be his main purpose, really. It was proving that the England potential excuses were completely unfounded by playing for the same club and doing really well. He's obviously not a long-term fit there. He was very good, though. I mean, he did what he needed to do. But yeah, I think he's probably not the long-term fit. And It was interesting to see when Hugh Jones came on. So I'm misremembering now. Did Hugh Jones come on and play on the wing? Because he came on for Maitland, didn't he?
He did. He came onto the wing. Yep.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens there, because I know he went through some terrible form, but you wonder whether he's refined that form. Maybe he takes some time on the wing, unconventional, but I don't think you need to change anything. But
so he's in there as he's been playing fullback for Glasgow this season, so he's converted to kind of being a back three cover as well. So it's good to see him getting some game time in the wing.
I mean, we've said it's quite a shrewd move from him, because he wasn't he wasn't on form at 13, but he gives that option now from the bench. And that's, if you're going to play for Scotland now, you're not going to, unless you're starting, you're not going to get on the bench unless you offer some versatility. Nobody's going to put a 13 on the bench that doesn't cover any other position unless you've got that a lot more versatility on the pitch. I mean, Harris, I think, can fill in at wing as well.
He came on at wing on his debut, I believe.
I think so, yes. And then letting
I
Samoan
don't think he looks I don't think he looks like a winger, to be fair. There's a big difference between being able to cover somewhere and actually being able to competently play somewhere. I mean, I could probably cover most positions in a rugby park. It doesn't mean I'm competent at any of them.
Grav, Stuart Hogg, I mean, we've given him a 9 out of 10. You were in a group chat with me. I said I wanted to marry one of the spiral kicks, and what I wanted to do to the other spiral kick is probably unrepeatable on a family podcast.
Another Facebook ban if you put it on you. You almost don't want to say it because it's so much of a cliche to talk about how good Hogg is and how important he is to Scotland. And then you watch a game like Saturday, you can talk about how good Hogg is and how important he is for Scotland. He was exceptional. It showed as well, sort of Farrell filling in at 10, because I think he's a 12. But he put an aimless kick through at one point, and then Hogg sort of, well, I'll show you how it's done, and picks it up, turns and bangs it back down. It's got to be demoralising as well, I would have thought, if you're English, but not being English, but to watch that and watch your captain put that kick through and then for it to be returned with interest in that way. But we're at the point, and since he's gone to Exeter, his level's gone up again, I think, and it's now hard to spot the weakness perhaps in his game. He's looking more rounded. He's looking like there's a lot more he could do. Whereas before, as with Finn, we were looking at sort of, he was an highlight reel on YouTube of him and his darting runs that he's making and stepping players. His all-round game is exceptional. And so you don't want to make it about, as it often is in the press, every time Scotland win, it's because of Finn and because of Stuart Hogg. But I mean, it's hard not to talk about him in glowing terms. It was good that he had 14 players that had played well around him as well on Saturday, but he's got to be given his credit and given his due for just how well he played. Yeah,
I mean, maybe he was a little less. I think the word Rory used on the blog ratings, Sam, was trying less Parise stuff. I.e., bits he didn't need to take on himself. I think having Finn Russell there relaxes him a little bit, because then he's quite happy to stand and do the fullback role and take the ball in rather than worrying what's happening in front of him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it. It's knowing what not to do as well, because the thing is, if you're constantly getting involved in the stuff you don't need to, when the ball gets to where you should be, then there's no one to do the stuff you do need to do. And so I think that as he gets confidence, and he should have confidence now that the rest of the team can do what needs to be done, then he's only going to get better, because there's so much less weight on him. He literally, all he has to do is stand back there, field kicks, decide whether to kick it or run it, and then when Scotland have the ball, choose where to enter the line, and that's basically it. And he is possibly the best in the world at those things.
Oof.
I said possibly.
Possibly. Don't get us too excited. You'll be getting.
You can come back, Sam. We like you.
I mean, wisely, Cammy didn't photo me for the Finn Russell segment. I think I'm slightly less up on Finn Russell than you are. But I mean, I realise now my invitation's the vote. But still, I wanted to be honest.
John, pick of the bench for you, because I'm not going to go through them all, but pick of the bench for you.
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I thought, now, a bit of a random shout, I thought purely because debut and surprising, Dave Cherry, actually, for me, came on and just done everything well. He was very solid. Everything kept going the right direction. Turner had such an impact that you would think that we might have lost something. The drop-off, we'd expect the drop-off from Turner to Cherry to be quite significant. Never noticed it. I thought he was very, very solid.
Yeah, good. I want to ask Sam and Grav, I want to ask you about the Scotland-Wales. Now, obviously, Dan Lydiat's gone down today. And he's 33 now, that, Lydia? So,
Yeah.
and he's out for the rest of the season. So, it's not looking good. But I guess I'm feeling confident as a Scotland fan going into the weekend. Grav, is that then the opposite true for you, or did you kind of see anything from the Ireland game that kind of gives you hope that this Wayne Pivac's starting to turn things around?
I don't think I'm the one who can speak for a nation on this, because I'm the one who's remained optimistic throughout Pivac's reign, and I'm still optimistic it's going to click at some point. There's a definite improvement. I mean, defensively, we looked a lot more sound than we have previously. I think we would have completely collapsed in that game sort of 6 months ago. We would have completely given in. So Gethin Jenkins has come in there, and whether it's just like, I think even a look from Gethin Jenkins would be enough for me to want to up my game and make sure I'm making those tackles. And he's notoriously not the happiest man in the world as well. So I don't think I'd want to be on the wrong side of him. Concerns wise, that line out does concern me. Our line out success rate has been poor since Pivac's come in, and since we brought in a new forwards coach, and it's looking very poor. So when you see Cummins and Gray sort of dismantling England's line out, they're great at winning them against the Todgy, and then we've got a front up in our line out and we can't hit a man at the best of times. That's the massive worry for me. And just taking some sort of possession at the Ruck. Our turnovers we've always struggled anyway at that point. Like Ireland, there was a typical game on Sunday where we just couldn't take the ball off them. Having watched Scotland just before half time, where they did exactly the same thing to England, my worry is that we're not going to see any of the ball, never mind convert it into points.
I suppose for the points kind of point is a relevant one, like you said, Sam, that Scotland-Wales, although Scotland were dominant in the autumn, they didn't score an awful lot of points against Wales. Scotland defensively are very good, but that's maybe where Wales could look to target Scotland, I guess, is that Scotland aren't finishing all their chances at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's been quite interesting couple of games, because I suspect that Scotland are going to play like Ireland played, which is just having endless amounts of ball. Wales had to make the second most tackles in Six Nations history on Saturday, and that took its toll. There's four Welshmen now out with possible. I don't think North or them. There's another one who's, I forget who it is now, but there's one other who's kind of potentially out. But Tompkins. So I don't think either of them will be out, but you've got four who are definitely out. So I think that Scotland will do something similar, probably make Wales tackle 180 times, maybe a little bit more. But I'm similar to Grav, actually. I'm surprisingly optimistic. I thought there was enough from that game on Sunday to suggest that we can make that number of tackles without letting the opposition come through. What's disappointing is that against a 14-man Ireland, we basically still just let them play exactly what their game plan is. And so against, presumably 15-man Scotland for the whole game, that'll be I think that'll be a harder task. But there's what's after green shoots but before like a full forest, like a kind of a field of potential wheat growing up. Yeah, a bud. Thank you. There's a bud
as well. No?
Yeah.
A bud of hope.
A bud of hope. Yeah. And progress. There's a bud of progress.
You can see. So you feel like you can see some progress and some kind of plan there.
I think there's something. I mean, we're getting the ball out. Only us and Wales and France scored more than a point per minute of possession. So we don't need the ball. We can be clinical when we don't have, we're clinical in the times when we do have the ball, and just defensively strong the rest of it. So I think there's something there. We still make handling errors. Our line out is awful. It was last year. I mean, the line out had the best success last year, but it was in terms of the amount of effective ball we had, it was the worst in the line in the Six Nations. So, and that's got even worse in this year. So it's a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I mean, John, we are, as Scotland, we are at our weakest when there is hope and when there is promise.
Yes.
So I don't want to say I'm cautiously optimistic for the weekend, but I'm not allowing anything more than that at this stage.
I'm all aboard the hype train. I'm choo-chooing all over the place. I thought, right, so I don't want to. I'm going to say this anyway because I thought Wales. Now I take your point regarding points scored and things like that, and eventually they did put away a very average 14-man Ireland. The fact is, Wales done their damnedest to lose that game as well, and they probably should have lost that game. I didn't see anything at all from Wales that would even remotely bother me as a Scotland fan. And the Welsh defence done what it done against, again, a very toothless Irish team, missing a player as well. I thought the Irish backs were just, Ireland, they were honking as well, let's be honest, right? So Scotland are a different proposition. We have the ability to break the line. We have the ability to get to cause any defence problems. I would be more than optimistic, actually, that Scotland could. And I think the point I was going to make earlier on, Scotland aren't scoring that many points just now, but we are very close to clicking. And when we click, we are going to give someone an absolute hiding.
It'll be the very Scottish thing that we win the championship in a year where none of us can go to the pub.
Yeah. I saw recently
and everybody else is honking as well.
Yeah. I saw the joke recently that it only took the pubs being closed for 6 months for Scotland to become worldies at sport.
The other, I think, worry for Wales as well is who's going to play 12 for us, because we seem to have had that problem since Adley Parks had left. We solved that problem, and then we've lost him to injury. So you say about us looking toothless in attack, we might be even more toothless because we might not have a 12 who can create anything, to the point where they're talking about Jamie Roberts being called up again, which he's playing fantastically well for the Dragons. But the last
I think he's booked in to do some sort of Zoom rugby bash this weekend and watch a live watch along. So they'll let people have to get refund. The WRU are going to have to refund people's virtual tickets.
They're very interactive.
Yeah, plus one of those GoPro helmets. He's playing. But
how bad would it be if Wales line up with Roberts and North in the centre?
Well,
that's
the worry for me as well. Is like he was at the point last week play, like he was turning slower than the Titanic. Like Thatcher turned quicker than Roberts did in his last game for Wales. So that's my worry, is if you've got Redpath, Russell and Hogg, defensively it might cause a few problems, and especially if they're kicking in behind. That's a concern for me. And he's playing some fantastic rugby, but he's playing some fantastic rugby for the Dragons as well. And nothing against the Dragons, but it's easy to stand out.
That's it. Any more for this weekend, John, Sam, and Grav? We all covered off. We're an hour and 10 minutes into this. I thought this is where we'd get to. I'm going to do something now. I've never used this jingle. I've made a special jingle, John. I've brought back an oldie but a classic. So here we go.
Fantasy League. We're going to have a chat about a Fantasy League. Fantasy League. It's time to have a chat about a Fantasy League.
So that's the hastily thrown together Fantasy League jingle visuals there. And you will notice from that the person that is top. Now we are... Every year, we are rubbish at Fantasy League on this podcast. We're not even mid-table. We're normally somewhere down the bottom. But inexplicably, not only have I topped our own pool on Super Brew, I've also topped the Scotland fans pool as well. I am first out of 2,062 people, and all I did was pick French backs. Because that's all. I made Dupont my captain. That's all I had to do. Everything else after that was a fluke.
I think that's basically going to be the tactic throughout, because let's be honest, Italy are not great.
I've tried this in years gone by and it's never come off. So it's not going to last.
They're even more not great than they usually are.
So apologies to David, who is in second place. He was first after Saturday. And he tweeted me to tell me that. It was also his birthday. But then after the Wales Ireland match, I got my points were calculated, and I'm now in first position. Grav, you do fantasy leagues at all with during Six Nations?
Yeah, we do in is it? I'm not sure for the Guinness one. I think we were on though. So
Yeah.
I went for the same tactic of Dupont as captain and hope the rest falls into place. As many Frenchmen as I can fit in. I think the limit is 4 on there, and absolutely 0 Italians.
How did you get on? How did you get on this weekend then, fantasy league wise?
Yeah, not too bad. I think I'm in 9th in our league. There's sort of 50 summit in there. It was thrown together hastily at the last minute. So I was surprised we even had 50, to be honest. But yeah, not a bad weekend. I had a moment where Robbie Squidge pointed out that everyone gets points for kicks. You can have to designate the kicker. So I had a mass panic and I changed my side completely. And I moved Cam Redpath to the bench and put Owen Farrell in. And that proved to not be the best idea because you get points for all sorts, and Redpath had a stormer. So that's knocked me down a little bit.
Yeah, how are you? How do you normally get on with fantasy league, Sam? You're an analyst. You should be well up on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you would think, Cammy. I mean, it is quite embarrassing in that people pay me for my opinion on rugby, and then I've never won a fantasy. I've even got close to winning a fantasy league. I used to. I had some friends where I was living down in London, and there was one other rugby fan, one person who was like a Six Nations fan, and then 3 or 4 who just came to the pub with us, and so we made a fantasy league. And I thought, well, I'll at least get second in this. I'm fairly confident of that. 5th place in that, and we did that for about 3 years running, and I think that 3rd was the highest I ever got. So I'm kind of sick of losing, really. So so yeah, I've decided to bail out.
Yeah, so you can join our Super Brew if you go to I think the Twitter page, our Twitter at Scott Rugby Blog. It's the pinned tweet is the code. So if you've already got a team, you can enter our pool, and we kind of read out the best team every week, which is me this week. So that's not going to continue. I will stress. John, I couldn't even find your team. Have you entered this year?
No. Do you know what? I've got the same issue as Sam. I overthink this. I get spreadsheets out and I start try to work out every possible permutation, and then I just inevitably finish second bottom. So I've gracefully retired my. I'm actually it's the same in football as well. My fantasy football this year started so well. If you remember one of the podcasts we've done, I had to bail out early to go and do my fantasy football draft. And it was going so well, and now it is progressing downhill at a rate if I was like a bobslayer, I'd be amazing because I am going so fast downhill just now. So yeah, fantasy, anything, and me apparently are not compatible anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Ryan, Ryan wants to know where's your OnlyFans lighting?
I'm in a different room.
Great answer, sir.
Right, it's time to do this now. Yes, it's Hands in the Ruck time, or any other business section of the podcast. We've got a couple from Twitter, and one from email, actually. You can email us, podcast@scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. So Isaac McDonald got in touch, and he says, his Hands in the Ruck is Scotland not moving up the world rankings after beating England away, but Wales moved up after beating Ireland at home. And that's just how rankings work. I can't really explain that. It's not like, it's all done on points and algorithms,
there's a calculator you can use to see. There's a really good calculator.
Scotland have massively closed the gap on, I think, Australia. I think we were at 80 points now. We've got 83, so that's not bad. You don't normally get 3 points on a rankings weekend, so that's not bad. I don't think we can be too upset about that. Sam on Twitter said, "This is like a standing item for us, John. The Guardian coverage of Scotland." Paul Rees is an obsession with Jock Box, and Robert Kitson only focuses on Russell the Hog. I think, I think we should be pleased that the Guardian journalists know some names of some Scotland players.
To be fair, that was basically our podcast last week as well. But so it was an obsession with people being obsessed with Jock Box and us basically drooling over Hogg and Russell. So we basically were the Guardian last week.
I need to do this now.
That's not getting old.
No, we've had a hands in the ruck in, and I'm going to try and find it now on my Twitter feed because it's disappeared. It was has it disappeared now? Somebody had a hands in the ruck about Maggie Alfonso. Oh, there it was. Craig Simpson said his hands in the ruck is the sexist abuse Maggie Alfonsi and Nolly Waterman have received just because they were presenting or commentating on a men's game at the weekend has been disgusting. It's further evidence that rugby values will forever be absolute nonsense. Sam, I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I particularly agree with the rugby value stuff. I mean, the fact is we like to, get up ourselves, for want of a better term, about rugby values and how much better it is than football or any other sport, which is nonsense. I mean, they both have good points to them, but they both have bad points to them. The fact that there's a ton of sexist abuse going on in football with commentators, and rugby's gone ahead and matched that. So yeah, it's incredibly depressing. Maybe it's getting less, but I mean, the fact it happens at all is just very depressing.
It's rugby values, so long as those values align exactly with mine.
Yes, exactly. It's rugby values of a 60-year-old man in a Gloucester clubhouse. It's and that's what we all have to aspire to.
So what we're saying is we should replace hashtag rugby values with just hashtag gammon values.
Yeah.
I've asked our guests to prepare their hands in the ruck. So Grav, I'll start with you. What's had its hands in your ruck this week? It can be good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, despite everything going so hard, I've struggled to cut it down to one bad thing. But being on a Scottish podcast, we'll go with Rugby Pass this week, deciding that England didn't want Cameron Redpath, the Frenchman. So that's very much the way they sold it. Was that they opted out of pursuing him. 12 for Scotland at the time.
That's the same way as I have opted out of being a millionaire.
Yeah, I've opted out of representing Wales as well.
That is ludicrous. I mean, all the evidence is to the contrary, and he's a young player, so to have given it up. To have given up on him at that age would be, It's Rugby Pass though, so what are you going to do?
Pinch of salt.
Yeah. Sam, what's had its hands in your ruck this week?
So mine's quite specific. So one part's a bit more general, which is people tagging players to tell them that they're awful. It's just, I mean, it's boring. And also, I have this thing in general that people. I mean, I'm nowhere near popular enough for anyone to really care, but people occasionally have negative opinions, and then they at you in them, and you think, just have them. Don't involve me. Just have them by yourself with your things. And I kind of think that if you think that Billy Burns' kick was awful, then just have that opinion, kind of by yourself. But the more specific part of it was, people are getting annoyed at the wrong kick. Gareth Davis's kick largely seems to have avoided as close scrutiny, and this all goes down to something that annoys me, which is scoreboard analysis. Whatever the scoreboard says, if England had won that game, if Finn Russell had dropped that goal that had been charged down and whoever had run up the other end of the pitch, and so England had won, then you got a bunch of people saying England were brilliant, Scotland were rubbish, whereas obviously the game was different to that. So I think that if you're going to have a go at a kick, it should be the Gareth Davis kick rather than the Billy Burns kick, because without the Gareth Davis kick, the Billy Burns kick doesn't exist. And so that's what's annoyed me this week.
Yeah, we suffer from that a lot, John. I think in Scotland, I think particularly recently that Scotland can play really well, and then people get irrationally furious about when we lose, even if we've played very well.
Yes, we do, and it's so refreshing to hear someone else saying about this idea of a game is not won and lost in those absolute milliseconds that happen. Yeah, there's bad decisions are made, but there's normally 79 minutes and 59 seconds also happening that can change a game. But we are really bad at that in Scotland. We do tend to focus our attention a lot on the negative elements of our players, and we've talked about this in the podcast a number of times, that we tend to focus on, right, Finn is flaky. Finn isn't flaky, right? But we have this view that he is. We focus on the weaknesses of our players. We quite often try to not we just call players rubbish, as opposed to try to, like we've talked in the past about, trying to understand what is it they're trying to do, what is their game plan, what are they being asked to do, are they executing the game plan correctly, or are they just not? People make mistakes as well. We're not coaching a bunch of robots to go and play rugby.
And I think a lot of the time it's people are analysing the view through rugby that was played in the 80s and 90s. Where, players were kind of beasted during the week by the forwards coach, and then just told, "On you go, lads! Go and try and run faster and tackle a bit more than the other team are doing."
And with that as well, you've got that expectation that players should do what players done in the 80s and 90s. So, we'll do a 99 call, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. Shut up! Stop being ridiculous.
I was actually in Twickenham when England played Italy. Italy played the Fox defence.
Yeah.
They bang, well, not offside, but behind the gain line. And I was covering it, but so I was in the nice seats with all the other, the posh people around me, and they booed the entire game every time an Italian player was offside. And I was sat there thinking, the first one, I understand that you think, oh, he's offside, and then it doesn't get blown up, and you go, that's confusing. Maybe I'll boo because that's what I'll do. Yeah. But then by the 12th time, surely you understand that there's something else at play here. But it was just people unable to get to understand what was going on, and like you say, seeing it through how they used to play, and when they used to play, no one did that kind of thing, and so it must be illegal.
Sadly, there was also a guy wearing the number 6 jersey that day who couldn't figure that out either.
Nobody boos in the posh seats at Murrayfield.
No.
We get in the nice seats occasionally to do the match coverage as well, and nobody. But I think it's the presence of Princess Anne. I think everyone's on their best behaviour. Yeah, it's my theory.
I'd heard rumours that no one actually booed in other stadiums. Actually, Cammy.
No, it's only Murrayfield and Scotstoun that happens.
John. Yeah. Then it's only Murrayfield during internationals, because there's not enough fans in Murrayfield during Edinburgh games.
Well, I need to build you an Edinburgh klaxon, John, because you're getting in trouble. I did a walk klaxon when you're in Edinburgh klaxon.
Well, we're talking about Royals behaving themselves as well. One of my hands in the ruck was almost Mike Tyndall today. I'm
pleased you said Mike Tyndall there, because I thought I was going to get sued, Grav. So thank you very much for having Mike Tyndall.
After he's apparently trying to claim furlough at the moment, because obviously he needs
from the royal family.
Yeah, he's trying to claim furlough.
Do you think it was Zara when she got confused and thought it was furlong?
Boom. It's here all day, folks. Tip your
There was somebody said there was a photo. I don't know if anyone saw this, but Princess Anne and is it Captain Mark Phillips? I think is her husband. Were watching the Scotland game, and it was obviously their butler had taken the photograph of them sat in this front room, and it was an absolute state. It was filthy, and then they posted it with a tagline: "Here's a selfie of them watching the game," and someone going, "No, it's not a selfie when your butler takes it." It's a butlery. What's it? A butlery?
And to be fair, like they've clearly, if the place is a state, they're obviously they've got to think about their priorities. Like they're employing this dude, right? You're clearly employed to take photographs of us. Maybe think about getting somebody employed for a wee bit of tidy up as well.
How easy is butlering when you're socially distanced from someone? I'm just trying to think. Or they're part of the same household.
I don't think a royal can take a selfie. It'd be a onesie, wouldn't
it? Very good, very good. I should just add, Princess Anne, very nice person.
So we like Princess Anne. We like
Princess Anne. She seems nice. I like nice. People who haven't changed their haircut for 40 years. I appreciate that staying power.
A level of respect for that.
I'll reach 40 with this hairdo, and that'll be me. I'll have kept the same hairdo since I was born. So
yeah, well, I don't really know what I'm talking about either. To be honest, John, I'm in the same boat as you.
You're joining the lockdown crew. Where's Cam going?
I know this is.
Cam has gone, right. So I suppose this means I need to take over for a wee bit. Oh, jeez, right. So anyway, yeah. So I think he was going to come to me for my hands in the ruck next, but I think we're probably going to talk a wee bit just now, and Cammy will join in again. It would be good to get your views on the inevitable negative press that came immediately after the game regarding the kneeling for the racism statement, and we believe four players. So here's Cammy's coming back. For those of you on audio, Cammy has disappeared and come back. We're now talking about racism, Cammy. We're talking about kneeling.
On.
There we go.
There you go. Sorry, I had a child half asleep child wandered into the room. It wasn't
introducing the topic of the Neilgate that happened after the game. I thought that might be your hands in the ruck.
It was. How did you guess it was my hands in the ruck?
Yeah. I am a dead gorgeous and sexy person.
I don't know where to start with this. So
what that?
No, with you being dead sexy and gorgeous. Oh, John, don't get me started on that. Kneegate's difficult. I think there's so many different layers to what happened within it, and essentially it's all sparked off in Scotland because football fans saw a photograph of 4 Scottish players kneeling, and because in football the instruction is you kneel when the whistle goes, then that's then through that optic they're thinking, well, why aren't those other players kneeling, rather than having the information that, well, actually all rugby players have been standing up until now and Scotland stood throughout the autumn. So with that context removed, it becomes a firestorm. Now the one issue I have with it is that England players kneeled throughout the autumn, or certainly a lot of them did. And the quotes that have come out from the Scottish camp since then is, we didn't know this was going to happen. It's like, you must have known, even if you weren't briefed on it, you've seen the games in the autumn. Why isn't someone in the SRU comms team saying, look, guys, on Saturday, you're going to be doing the rugby against racism thing. It's going to happen. We know the England team are going to kneel. So it's up to you what you want to do, but we're making you aware that you're going to be stood there whilst some of them are kneeling, and you might want to reflect on that. And I think that's kind of what Ali Price was saying today, is he said it felt right. He didn't kneel in the autumn, but it felt right to do it there in that time. And although he hasn't said it, I can understand why he would choose to do it alongside England players who have been outspoken, like Beno Obano and Maro Itoje, about racism in rugby. So to do it in solidarity with them at that time in Twickenham meant something. The problem then is, well, where does Scotland go from here? Because they can't win now. I don't mean it. You don't win or lose anti-racism, right? But they're on a hiding to nothing now, because what do they do against Wales? I think the safest thing for them to do is to probably stand, if I'm honest, because Wales will stand, and then from an optics point of view, you have 2 teams standing as they have always done throughout the autumn, and that's where we end up. But then that's not going to appease people who've now going to say, why haven't Scotland kneeled? And it's this thing. I mean, the whole rugby against racism thing feels really hollow anyway, because I get why they've asked players. They've said players can stand because the Pacific rugby players don't kneel before anybody other than God, and it just get really complicated if you started insisting people kneel, and even then the kneeling becomes hollow, because it's about wearing a poppy. You're just forcing people to kneel.
Yep.
When they might want to do it, they might not. So I don't know where they go from here, Scotland. I do know that some people are disappointed that Scottish players haven't kneeled in the past. And I get that, because I can. Well, I've written the blog article before saying, I don't think the SRU rugby does enough in promoting rugby for black and minority ethnic players. And it doesn't do enough for doing it for poor white players either, I would point out as well, because it doesn't invest in the right areas. That's another debate. But I don't know where they go from here. This is the problem now. They didn't brief the players, essentially, is what I come down to with my frustration with it, is that the players weren't briefed, and so they were confused. You saw Chris Harris looking along the line to check what was going to happen, then he kneels. So, yeah, it's frustrating. I don't think the communication's been good enough from the SRU either in explaining very clearly this wasn't the approach that we took in the autumn. It's not the approach rugby globally is taking. And I don't think, has this reached much outside of Scotland, Sam? Because it doesn't seem to be I don't think it's been picked up or an issue anywhere other than in Scotland right now.
I don't I think it has to a certain extent. I think it's. I don't think it's. I don't have the same context of it, so I don't think that's made out here in terms of how it differs, how football and rugby differs. I think it has probably made it out into the wider world, but then I do follow very woke Twitter people, so it has been an issue there. I think my take on it is, all the behind the scenes stuff. It just needs to be clear that, I mean, either there is a 30-second you kneel or you don't kneel, but that's a 30-second where it's devoted to the kneeling bit, or it's we all stand and you bow your head or whatever, or you clap, or but there needs to be something, because at the moment you've got someone's kneeling, someone's standing, and is the person standing, are they anti-racist or are they just confused about what it is that they could be doing? Yep. But I do think that whenever it's raised the possibility that you should that people could justify their position, it's always batted back as, oh, it's just personal choice, which I think is fair to an extent. But if I was basically doing the opposite of an anti-racist protest, if I was stood, then I would be very certain that I was making it clear as to why it was that I was standing. I want the opportunity to do that, because some people, although I may not understand it, don't kneel because they don't kneel for anyone other than God, and that's completely fair enough. And maybe some people don't kneel because, I don't know, whatever reason it might be. And I think there needs to be an opportunity for those people to explain why they don't, rather than have it just batted away as, oh, it's just personal opinion, because it is an anti-racist protest, and if you're not doing it, then there's connotations there.
Yeah, I mean, Grav, what's the reaction been like in Wales? Because I think all the Wales players have always stood. Is that just kind of been accepted that's how they're responding to it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it comes down to it, as you said, sort of sorting that out before you get out on the pitch. Like, players should know. I know, like with the Gallagher Premiership clubs, they all issued statements and went through exactly what they would be doing, like the base stand in the shape of a heart and this sort of stuff. I think that's the main thing. Like, if you've got someone in the team who's got an issue with kneeling, then maybe they need to talk around the way where everyone could show respect without those players standing out. Because it does become a point where then we're talking about individual players rather than the issue as a whole. So it does come down to, let's just talk it through and drill it into players before they go on the pitch. Don't forget, this is what we're going to do. This is our plan. It seems pretty simple. It's a very short conversation. I'm not saying the union needs to be involved or we need to bring coaches in, but as players, why are they not communicating with each other? There was a point where one of the players, I can't remember, one of the England players is looking across the line and almost looking a little bit disappointed at one point. You think, well, have you not had that conversation before you've gone out on the pitch?
Yeah. I think George Turner's wife had tweeted that he didn't even know any of that happened until he got off the pitch and phoned, and got home, because they're standing in a line 2 meters apart, socially distanced, even though they're about to play a rugby game, which is ludicrous.
As well, yeah.
He's staring straight ahead, so he's got no idea what anybody else is doing further up the line. So like it's that coordinated response, John, I think that's lacking. And Stuart Hogg did talk about, we won that for the whole of Scotland.
Yep.
But the whole of Scotland has to mean something, and they have to show that it means something and find a way of doing it. I'm not saying that means they have to kneel, but they do need, I think, now to, unfortunately, they're put in a situation where they need to show that it's for the whole of Scotland somehow and find a way of communicating that.
Yeah, it was very telling, actually, that after the final whistle on Saturday, I received 3 text messages very quickly after it. 2 of which were very congratulatory. The other one was, why weren't the Scotland players kneeling? And that was interesting, and that does show the impact that's had. And I think you're absolutely right. Rugby continues to have that reputation in Scotland as being the posh boys sport, and we aren't shaking it, and the SRU are not doing enough to shake it as well. I think we have to really be clear about that. They do have to be held accountable for that. I think the idea of kneel, no kneel, again, yeah, it's a conversation that has to take place, and there has to be a way to show, like, obviously we are a woke podcast. We fully agree with all of the context and everything that's been stood for or kneeled for or whatever is happening. However, we also have to look above that and say, do you know what? Are our governing body doing enough for this? Are our unions doing enough? Rather than worrying about whether some players have kneeled, some players haven't, why are we not talking about the Aston Hewitt stuff? Why are we not talking about the racism that happens on the park? Why are we not talking about the homophobic language from Bastero a few years ago? Why are these stories not being told? Why, we've obviously talked about the Pacific Island stuff, Cam. So there's much more to be done. And I think we, as fans, need to be more accountable and be asking these questions as opposed to worrying about whether players are doing a 30-second, kneel or not.
The thing is, I don't know where rugby goes from here because it's dug itself a bit of a hole. When does it stop? Because actually, the Six Nations was probably a good opportunity to say we're not going to start clapping for everybody and doing this silence at the start of every game, because there was a natural line. We did it through the autumn, we've done it through the summer. Let's acknowledge that we are going to tackle this issue as a sport, but we don't need to do it before every game, because otherwise are we going to constantly clap for the NHS and have a moment's silence, Sam, for rugby against racism for forever in rugby now? I mean, at what point are we going to do it till racism solved, which seems like a big ask?
I think that is possibly what the problem was, almost doing it in the first place, rather than what happened in the NFL, where players kneel during the anthem. Which is arguably a more powerful protest than having a 30-second kneeling time. I think that it's very difficult because, is it better? Let's say, Ben Earl, for example, doesn't kneel, and Itoje does. But let's say that Ben Earl donates half his paycheck to some worthy cause. How do we balance up those two things? And is it someone who's not kneeling is necessarily bad? I think that they should be explaining themselves, but I completely agree with you, Cammy. I mean, where does it go? And really, the kneeling is a powerful message of togetherness and kind of solidarity, which I think is often gets overlooked as it's like an empty gesture because you're not donating money or donating time or something, but it's still a gesture of solidarity. It's like the shamefully I don't know his name, the Australian sprinter who stood on the podium as the two Black American athletes held their hands up in that protest. I mean, that is a powerful show of solidarity. So it's an important thing to do, but at some point it does need to be replaced by actual, the SIU putting money in, and the WRU as well putting in money into making sure that Ashton Hewitt and Falatau aren't kind of the two black faces that we see in Welsh rugby, really.
Well, that's absolutely spot on. The fact that we're naming two players, in the Welsh sort of setup, the fact that Scotland, Joe Ansbro, perhaps the last
Daryl Marfo.
Daryl Marfo, there you go. Yep. But it's the fact that we can rhyme off a couple of names is telling of where we're at. It's not representative, and if we're wanting to make a sport that's inclusive and representative of all, we need to be doing more.
The representative thing is interesting because you get lots of people saying, well, the black and minority ethnic population in Scotland is 1%, and I think it's 14% for the whole of the UK or England. But it's not about being representative on a proportional basis. It's about reflecting the community, right? And it's not. I mean, even if you take that 14% for Great Britain, well, the English rugby team's probably above that anyway, percentage-wise. Off the top of my head, I would guess. So it doesn't have to be. You don't have to meet quotas, Grav.
Yeah, I think the problem is though the sort of the actions of rugby are not matching up with this idea of it being. And we always say, it's a game for all, and it's inclusive, and it's not showing that. I mean, we're at the point where, at least in the Pacific Islands documentary, where they're being treated absolutely shabbily. It's almost like being empirical again. Like the RFUs sort of old on it, and then it's branched out onto other predominantly white nations that are old in this. And then we're seeing it like the Argentina incident where we've got Matera, and then there was an incident earlier on in the year, which was sort of racism and classism in Argentina. And then falling over as well then into the LGBTQ community, where we've got the laws coming into place against trans women players. like Rugby's brand at the minute is tarnished on this front. I don't think kneeling's going to do much to bring that back. What we actually need is someone with some actions to actually try and bring some movement in it. We can kneel all we want to if people setting the laws are either not changing them or changing them for the worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
100% that.
On that note, because I don't want to bring this down, because Scotland did beat England at Twickenham this weekend, 6-11. Let's not forget that. I think we will leave it there for this week because we're rapidly running out of time, and I need to go and check that the small child that ran in here is not going to run in here again live on the internet. We should just say we are.
Because I left as we started talking about racism, and it looked like I was making an anti-racist. I just had to get a charger because my laptop was about to die.
To be fair, Grav, the folks on the folks watching live couldn't tell because you've kind of blended into your background spectacularly now, mate. Is that a red shirt you're wearing?
It's a green shirt. It's an away shirt.
All right, because I mean,
Yeah,
I thought you were supporting the All Blacks.
That's like the gold and white dress, isn't it? It's trying to work out what shirt. What colour.
I've had to go for soft light there. I don't look good in the
Mate, yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, Sam knows as well. Like, he's obviously started to cut the top of his head off.
Oh yeah.
Just in case.
I only lean back occasionally, and it's mostly
Yeah, just because I mean that light is not flattering, eh?
Not flattering, no.
Speaking of keeping things nice and trim, John, we are in partnership with Manscaped.com. So if you go to manscaped.com/Scottish Rugby, you can get 20% off plus free shipping on all sorts of things. Like you get you can get this kit bag. This is the ultimate grooming kit, isn't it? With your trimmer. I wouldn't recommend using this on the top of your head. You can use it down below to keep yourself nice and trim. Like I said, it's not something I do. If it's something you're into, then give that a go. You can get 20% off. You've also got the Manscaped Refined for the gentlemen. Valentine's Day this weekend. You know, we're all locked inside. There's no reason you can't smell nice for your lady or gentleman friend.
And remember, you don't need a waft, as we pointed out to Cammy last week.
I
as
know,
he was
let's have a waft.
place.
How do we smell last week? And I said, I'm going to have a waft of that. And John said, I'm not necessarily sure you should be having a waft of aftershave.
It's not how it works, bud.
A spritz, is that what you'd call it?
Yeah, just a waft is too much. I mean...
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, you can get nose hair trimmers, all sorts of things, and we obviously it's a paid partnership for us, so we do get a bit of money back, which helps fund the podcast. So if you are into any kind of keeping yourself trimmed downstairs, you want to smell nice, give them a go, and you'll be helping us out. So thank you very much for that. I did say I'd stick that at the end of the podcast, so people don't have to go through it at the start. That's it from us this week. I think unless we lose, I'm going to be on Grav's podcast next week.
I like the way you put the little disclaimer in, unless we lose, and then
unless we lose, in which case, I might find that one of the kids falls ill or something, and mysteriously getting all of a sudden, I'm going to go and meet friends or something and break lockdown. I can't use excuses. This is the problem with lockdown. You can't use excuses like that to rely on kids. Thank you very much, Sam and Grav, for joining us. Hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you very much for having us.
It's goodbye from me and goodbye from John.
Hey, folks.